James, how's it going?
Hey, what's up? How are you?
Not much, man. What about you? How's
Oh,
everything?
hanging in there. Just
Yeah,
enjoying the Cali weather. It's like 95 degrees today.
that's nice. That's
So
nice. It was a surprising 50 something degrees here today in New Jersey. So
nice, nice,
yeah,
very
yeah,
cool.
very
So,
nice.
but yeah, so I'm excited to be here. So I appreciate you inviting me.
Well, I'm happy to have you on. So for people watching, James is a man of many hats, which is my favorite kind of actor, producer, person. Started off in doing acting back when in the when was it roughly you
Oh
started
my
acting?
God. Well, I mean, I started out at like 14 doing theater.
Okay.
That's how I fell in love with acting. And at
Mhm.
16, I was like starring in my first theatrical production in The Little Mermaid, playing Prince
Nice.
Eric.
Okay.
That all was kind of a fluke how it all happened. I just wanted to kind of be involved, get my feet wet a little bit, see like, how it was to work at, they had like, it was, I don't know if you know Middlesex County College. You remember, do you
Yeah.
know
Yeah.
that?
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Yeah,
Because you're originally from Jersey before you
yeah,
went out to California.
exactly. Grew up in Jersey. And so they had this program and I saw something, I guess in the magazine or newspaper, and they said they were looking for, some teenagers to help out for the summer camp thing at Middlesex County Theater that they had there. And so I went, showed up. I was super shy, introverted kid growing up. And so I went, thought it'd be fun, meet, new people, summertime. So I figured make some new friends. And, and so they announced they were going to do Little Mermaid. I was like, okay, cool. And then he started like kind of pointing out like who's going to play what role. And his girlfriend at the time, the director's girlfriend, God, I don't remember his name. Maybe shouldn't even say it anyway. But he had a girlfriend that was, an actress, and so she was playing. Was it Ariel?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I think it's Ariel.
Mermaid.
Yeah.
And so he's assigning everybody, and then he goes, James, you're going to be playing Prince Eric. I was like, wait, what? It's like, okay. So apparently he felt casting wise, I was the only 16-year-old that fit the part.
Yeah.
And so I was like, nervous as all get. Number one, playing such a major role at such a young age, like my first real theatrical production. And then number two, to be playing, Ariel's my love interest, right? And as a 16-year-old, I'm supposed to like kiss this 20-something-year-old woman who happens to be the director's, it was just like a little peck. It wasn't, obviously they kept it PG. But it was really cool. It was fun. And, the audience loved it. And afterwards, the little kids would come over and they asked me to like sign their little playbill. And so that's like when I first got like my real first taste of acting. And I said, okay, I think I kind of like this.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this is kind of cool, like being able to entertain people and make them forget like their horrible day or their horrible week for an hour and a half. And so that's when I decided at 16, I was like, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah.
that's a long answer to your question.
No, it's a good one. It's a good one. So I actually didn't. We've known each other now for a couple of years, and I didn't even, I didn't know. It's always interesting when you talk to someone. It's like, well, how'd you get started? In a lot of cases, you kind of just take somebody in this industry as you meet them in that moment,
right?
Unless they were famous or whatever,
right?
And that just through the, the world. But so. I know you. So you went to California. Because I know you did. Ironically, you did a couple of commercials in the early 2000s, late 2000s that I remember seeing, and I said to myself, "Well, that guy's really good." And then when we started talking, and you had sent me a reel of your stuff, and I was like, "Holy crap, that's the guy that I thought was really good all those years ago." That's crazy.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah, it was really. Because I always looked for that stuff when I was watching TV. I would look for good actors because I was so tired of seeing bad actors and so much stuff. Yeah. And when you would see a good actor, that person would really jump out at you, So
no, commercials were fun. That ride lasted for a few years, early to like mid to, I think 2008 is when it all kind of, all the commercials just started to dwindle.
Yeah.
I had a good like 5-year run.
Yeah.
National commercials, did over a dozen, was in a Super Bowl commercial. Don't ask me who was playing, or I have no idea. I don't really watch football, but it was really cool. And like, I start going to the grocery store and people would be going, and I'm like, yeah, that was me. They're like, oh, that's cool. And I was like, wow, I'm getting recognized from being in commercials. That's crazy. But you're in everyone's house. Like when you do a commercial, I mean, that's like millions of eyes are seeing you. So I know a lot of people in the industry, especially sometimes other actors, they kind of poo-poo commercial actors. They think it's like, oh, that's, it's like being an extra doing a commercial. But it's, I mean, I made some decent money. 10 to 20 grand for like 4 to 8 hours of work. I don't think that's too shabby. And then you get residuals every time it airs. And I'd go to my mailbox, there'd be a check for like 2,500, and like next week there'd be another check for like 1,250.
It's nice.
$150. But yeah, even today, like I'll get something that I did 12 years ago, like some of the TV shows. I won't mention which ones, but there's certain ones that just I'll get like a 2-cent residual check, and I'm like, 2 cents? Like it cost you more to send me this 2 cents? Like that's crazy.
I get that from one thing I did. I'll get like every once in a while like a 5 cent. I have not cashed one check of those, but yeah, it's kind of funny.
Like, what do you do with it? It's the paper's worth more than what's printed on it.
That's true.
So, but yeah, so commercials was a great, I think, a great way for me to get my feet wet and kind of like make money and make a living as an actor out here. So, that helped definitely having me survive all these years.
So what made you, I'm always interested when someone moved from the East Coast to the West, or the West to the coast, or the West to the East. So what made you decide you wanted to move to California from New Jersey?
I always wanted to. I always felt like, I mean, at least, back when I did it early, like 2001, that was kind of like how things worked, right? You had to move to LA if you really wanted to make it as a movie star. You know what I mean? Yeah, New York has a lot of stuff, but it's, more, I always felt like New York was more centered for people that really want to do theater and Broadway, and like that's a great hub for that. There's film and TV there, but I just didn't think that was where an actor would really get their big break. So I was always waiting for my Matt Damon. Too bad we didn't know each other, because I could have been your Ben Affleck. So I was always like, for years I was like, God, I want to team up with someone and move out there and like, go at this industry together as a team, rather than going at it alone, because I know how hard and difficult it is. And we can both be there to support each other emotionally, and if we have to get a place together, you know what I mean, like it's like at least you have it feels like you have a little bit of family with you, being so far away from home. And that never happened. So I was actually working at the Oxygen Network, because I actually ended up going into casting years ago, and so I was a casting associate for a show on Oxygen, and they ended up canceling the show I was working on. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to be getting unemployment. So I'm like, what better time to like make the move when I know I've got like a secure amount of money that's coming in, for a certain period of time. And so, so I took that leap and literally met somebody, I think on MySpace, who was like, you could sleep on my couch until you find a place. I was like, okay, cool. It was in Beverly Hills, so I figured he can't be a serial killer if you live in Beverly Hills. I'm sure he could be, but and I, even lied to my mom at the time and told her that, oh yeah, it's this guy I went to high school with, like he, so I just said somebody that I kind of knew, and so so she wouldn't freak out. But I did leave his number in case I went missing. I was like, here's his phone number. And so I slept on the dude's couch for probably about, I think, 3 weeks. And then that's when things started to get a little creepy.
Oh, really? Okay. So it did go bad.
Yeah. And so he's like, he was an older guy, you know, I'm like 25.
Yeah.
When I was 25, I looked like I was 17. You
Yeah.
know, I always looked younger. And so he looked like a newscaster. He had like white hair, you know, and, you know, distinguished type of gentleman. And he started to like say stuff and like, you know, I really love having you here. And, you know, you're such a good looking guy, but,
Yeah.
you know, I just, it's really hard to like not be able to do stuff with you like physically. And I was like,
Oh my God. Well, those are usually the good warning signs that it's time to vacate the
yeah.
premises.
So I said, okay, yeah. So he's like, I don't mind you staying here as long as we, you know, if you allow me to. And I was like, no, it's cool. I'll find. And so like that same day, I went, got the LA Times, and found a place in Burbank,
Yeah.
and ended up moving in. And that's a whole other story. The lady was 91 at the time,
Wow.
and her daughter was looking for someone to just rent one of the bedrooms in the house.
Okay.
And so that was like a perfect setup for me.
Yeah.
And it kind of felt like family because, you know, lady was awesome. She was an artist. Her husband was like the mayor of Burbank back in the day.
Wow.
And she was just so talented, like such an amazing woman. And so I ended up becoming very close with her and kind of adopted her as like my grandmother, you know, because cool. I didn't really have any grandmothers. The one grandmother I had was in Italy at that time, and the other one had passed away. And so you know, she was very grandmotherly, such a sweet lady. And I was there for about 4 years.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And so anyway, not to go into that, that's a whole other story, but one day will be a movie. But she was an amazing, phenomenal lady.
I always, you know, those stories always, I remember reading something about Brad Pitt, how when he moved to Hollywood, he was working as someone's pool boy or something in some rich guy's place or whatever. And I just always like, I just don't feel like those stories ever go well.
Yeah.
They just don't. They always sound like they start off, person was so nice, you know, they looked very whatever. And
the honeymoon period.
Yeah, and then it just always, it de-evolves into like something that you're just like, holy shit, you know? So it's good that you got out of there though.
Yeah. So I ended up going into property management. I did the whole like waitering at high-end events, you know, worked at Elton John's Oscar party twice, like 2 years in a row.
Okay.
And that was, you know, that was interesting.
I'm sure that's an experience. We'll talk about that later when we're not recording.
Right. So, but anyway, so I the property management totally saved me because that gave a roof over my head. I didn't have to worry about how I was going to pay my rent. It gave me the flexibility I needed to be able to go to an audition, or if I needed to do a shoot or whatever, I kind of like, you know, was able to make my own schedule. So, you know, so it worked out really well. It kind of saved me. I think, I don't think I would have been really screwed. I don't know how I would have lasted out here for as long as I did if I didn't fall into property management.
Yeah, I think it's, if you can get a job that is, you know, I spent most of my 20s with the idea that I can't have anything really serious because then I'm going to get too comfortable, and you know, I need to be able to leave something at the blink of an eye for an audition. But then as time goes on and you're like, well, shit, it's been like 4 months, I haven't had an audition. I could have made some money and been a little bit more comfortable and, you know, whatever. I think it's really good if you can end up finding something that you can make a legitimate living in, live your life so that you're experiencing life, because that's what we're, you know, as creative people, you are supposed to be interpreting the script and putting life into it. You know what I mean? As an actor or whatever. And if you don't have any real life experience, then you can't really be a very good actor or writer or director, in my view. So I think that it's good if you once I kind of realized that, I started saying, I probably realized it a little bit later than my parents had hoped I would realize it, but I realized it anyway. And then, you know, it's like, oh, wow, you know what? There's also people out there in the world who have real freaking problems, you know, and my problem is that this dream hasn't happened yet, but there's people out there that don't know where they're going to eat, or they don't know where they're going to sleep, you know, stuff you were going through. So it's,
I literally had a point where, this is before property management, when I was living with that older lady.
Yeah.
My car got repossessed because I couldn't afford to pay it. The guy came on a Sunday morning and I watched him tow my car away. And I literally had $5 to my name, and I had to go get groceries. And so I was like, okay, what can I get that can last me a week? And so I got bread and milk. Because I knew milk could go with the peanut butter and jelly I would make with the bread, that I knew I had peanut butter and jelly at home, and milk would also go with cereal.
Okay.
So I knew, like, right there, that's a couple different meals I can have.
Yeah.
And so, and then a buddy of mine, actually, who's a good friend of mine, and he's a screenwriter and he's like a brother. I've known him for over 20 years. He found out and he like wired me like, $100. He's like, dude, why didn't you tell me? And I'm like, that's just not me. I'm not the type to, I don't ask people for handout or help, or that's just, I'm not, that's just not my nature. So, but yeah, so, when people say things to me like, oh, you're privileged, or you're, you don't have, you haven't struggled like other people have to struggle. And I'm like, what makes me, like, yeah, my parents are immigrants. I didn't get anything. Like, I had everything I have in life. I mean, they raised me, the best they could. I always had food and clothing on my back. We lived in a nice little middle-class neighborhood. But I've been working since technically I was 13, starting at my dad's pizza shop every weekend. And then at 16, I was working at Staples. So for me, like, those values were instilled in me at a young age, that you have to work if you want something. If if you want nice things, you got to work. And so I think that's where a lot of my values come from. My discipline, is having had that desire at such a young age to want to be able to provide for myself. Because I knew my parents couldn't always afford to get me the stuff that I wanted as a kid. So I knew, well, if I worked, I'll be able to get the things that I want. I don't have to burden them.
Well, I think those are very valuable lessons to have, and to learn, and life will find a way to reinforce that. So, but it's very, those are lessons that I think just help build character. It's funny because our industry is smoke and mirrors. It's illusion. It's what's behind the curtain. Even in making a movie, and are you able to trick the audience into believing you spent more money than you did, or you actually burned a house down when you didn't? Like all those things. This takes place on a like one of your films, a Western town, over 100-something years ago. Or longer, and in fact. So, but with all that, it's just very interesting that, I think if you're going to be successful, you have to be grounded. You have not that everybody is, because there's a lot of famous people that are not grounded. And, I've heard a lot of stories about, the fantasy land that some of them live in. But,
I think at some point people just get stuck in a bubble. You know what I mean? Everyone's afraid to say no to them. And they're just used to everyone saying yes and handing them what they want. And, and then their career starts to maybe kind of tank a little bit. But they still think that in their minds that they're still that person from 10 years ago. And so it's just people lose sight of reality. I think a lot of people in the industry, once they hit a certain level, they kind of get where they came from.
And I think it's interesting. I mean, I don't know the guy. I've never met him, but Denzel Washington seems to be one of those guys that, I feel like at some point he started to get into a bubble and then he got himself out of it. And then his acting just got even more visceral, where there's other actors where I felt like they started so strong and they were so good and so engaging and so interesting.
And they lost it.
And then they just become, you're watching them and you're like, what happened to that guy that was in that movie? Like, that guy doesn't seem like this guy. And that was only 4 or 5 years ago. And I thought, even at a young age, before I even knew I wanted to do acting, I'm like, I wonder what changes somebody. And then I really felt like it's ego. Your ego changes you because you stop realizing what is real and what real people go through, you know, and
Yeah.
it's very interesting study, you know, in that kind of stuff. And then having met some people who are considered well known, you know, you see the people who are really nice, and then you see the performance they give, and then you see the people that are maybe not so nice and the performance that they give, and it's interesting. It's an interesting
Yeah.
walk. It's a very interesting walk.
Yeah, for sure. Never a dull
So
moment.
yeah. So you're still doing acting. You're still
Yep.
doing that a lot. Um, I know you do a little bit of writing, right? Or
I'm more of like I write, like I've done short stories,
okay,
and then they've been developed into features.
okay,
So
okay.
I did a horror thriller. You know, I
Hmm.
had this story in my head for a while, and I said, okay, I need to start writing this down because it was
Yeah,
pretty interesting.
yeah.
And so I just did I think it was like a 10-page short story. And then a screenwriter read it, loved it,
Hmm.
and was like, do you mind if I turn this into a screenplay?
Hmm.
I was like, that would be amazing. And
Yeah.
so that's a project that, you know, I'm looking to be able to kind of get off the ground at some point. So right now I'm trying to focus on building more of the producing side. You know, I've done like 5, 6 films in like the last 14, 15 months where
Yeah.
I was an EP
Hmm.
uh, on a few, and then a co-EP on a couple. Did one with Liam Neeson and Jessica Lange most recently, where
Cool.
I was a co-executive producer on. And then before that, I'm an executive producer on a film with Mel Gibson, Josh Duhamel.
Hmm.
That's an action thriller. So uh, the whole reason why I got into that side is to be able to get more of those acting opportunities, to open up that door, to create my own path. You know,
Hmm.
because I know no one else was going to open that opportunity for me. You
Yeah.
know, especially a place like LA. There's just so many people that everyone's an actor, and
Yeah.
so I just got tired of just sitting, you know, in a file waiting for my phone to ring. You
Hmm.
know, it's like I was doing pretty well, and then all of a sudden it just all kind of fizzled. And
Yeah.
so I knew I had to somehow come up with another game plan. Otherwise, I was going to have to go become a shoe salesman at like Nordstrom's, you know. And I
Yeah.
know that wouldn't work for me because personally, I'm not into feet.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I figured, okay, let me come up with another game plan. And so I was like, how do you get past the gatekeepers,
Hmm.
you know? And so I was like, well, you kind of have to become a gatekeeper, or you
Hmm.
have to at least be friends with the gatekeepers. And what do gatekeepers like? Well, if you're able to bring money to their project, you know,
Yeah.
people don't turn down money. You
Yeah.
know, a lot of all these independent movies that are there's more independent movies being made today than probably I would ever, because there's just such a need for it with all the platforms that are out there.
Hmm.
Studios aren't really, you know, I had a very well-known producer that I'm friendly with who's done big movies, like, you know, uh, with franchise type stuff. And so he was saying he worked for a studio pretty much like his whole career. And he's like, yeah, he goes, unfortunately, studios aren't making movies anymore. You
Yeah.
know, everything they're doing is 100 million and up.
Yeah.
You know, they're not doing movies for like a couple million, 5, 10 million. It's just not worth their time. They're
Hmm.
after the big, they want to make $1 billion at the box office.
Yeah.
Like that's their target,
Yeah.
and their goal. And so that's why there's just such an explosion right now of independent films, and there's actors that are just looking for work. I mean, Sandra Bullock recently, I don't know if you read her, she had a little article. She spoke about how like thankful she was for Netflix. She goes,
Mm.
Netflix, if it wasn't for Netflix, there'd be so many people out of work. Like
Yeah.
because of Netflix, there are so many actors, directors, writers, cinematographers. I mean, you know, extras, all different types of aspects of the industry that wouldn't exist if it wasn't for Netflix. People would be out of work, and she even said herself, she goes, I'm thankful because I wouldn't be working right now. Like she you know had a lull for a
Yeah.
while. She wasn't really doing much, and
Yeah.
I
The
like
last
her.
thing I remember seeing her in was Gravity.
Yeah.
And that was, man, I don't know, what was that, like 5, 6 years ago, maybe, I
Right.
think, at this point.
Yeah.
So,
And she's
and
got a couple films now, I think, that are coming out, that are out already, I think, on Netflix. And
yeah,
so, yeah, she made a pretty good point,
yeah.
a lot of actors at her level wouldn't really say that out loud,
Hmm.
and the fact that she admitted it and was pretty candid about it, I thought was pretty,
Yeah, it's
pretty,
stand up. That's definitely
yeah,
a stand up thing to do.
right.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, thank God for these platforms. I mean,
Hmm.
Amazon, Apple TV, Hulu, and they're all making movies and TV shows, and
Hmm.
so it's a great time to be in the industry.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's just, I agree. We've talked about this other, besides this, but I mean, our last film that we made, I mean, it's on Paramount Plus, and that's such a huge, like, holy crap. I can sit there and look at, the my list and look at, oh, Star Trek 4. I
right? Mission
remember that.
Impossible. Yeah,
Yeah, and I can look at these movies. Oh, Clandestine. Well, it's right there with all those other ones, and
right.
it's a nice feeling. That, and I think that it's interesting that audiences are changing. And I last season of the podcast, I was talking to a lot of people about, the change in quality and what storytelling is. Um, and what I think was really interesting, this one guy, Sal Conca, his podcast, he talked a lot about, like, the campfire. When we were kids,
Mhm.
it was, oh, Amazing Stories is on Sunday night at 8 or whatever it was. And, I couldn't stand Full House, but people would watch it. So
Yeah,
X-Files, and then people would talk about it on Monday at work. And there were these events, and there was a sense of community that developed around what shows were on and what you could talk about and what you could share. And, you might not agree with somebody on a couple of topics, but you both loved the show last night.
right.
Um,
Alf,
hmm Alf,
Alf.
Alf, right, right, right. So it's like, and now what's happened is there's all these little campfires, of Netflix, Paramount Plus, this and that. And that. So
Mhm.
it's kind of separated people, but it's allowed audiences to maybe get stories that are a little bit deeper than they would have been otherwise, if we were just relying on the big studios or the networks again, because they're always going to chase the money
Right.
and the big bang. They want the big bang, whereas the indie people, the smaller people, they're going to chase the story because they don't have the money for the big bang. And honestly, if you're not doing this and making millions of dollars or hundreds of thousands of dollars, you're doing it because of your passion for it, because it's just too hard otherwise.
Yeah.
It's too hard, it's too difficult, it's too disappointing. So unless you feel like you have something creatively you really want to say, we don't all have, and God bless him, the Quentin Tarantino thing where the dude worked in a video store. I worked at Blockbuster, but I didn't have the Quentin Tarantino route.
Yeah.
Um, and he worked and then he made this movie that, honestly, if he probably made, it's like Brothers McMullen. I don't know if you looked at that recently.
I
That
saw it when it like came out years
Yeah,
ago,
it's,
but
the quality is horrific. If you released a movie
uh,
like that now, no
yeah,
one would watch it. Like, before we started recording, we were talking about the importance of having good sound and good
right,
audio, and, or
right,
that's the same thing. Good film and good quality and good lighting, good cameras and all
yeah,
that.
yeah,
And that movie did not have it. But it was this huge, huge movie, that, Clerks, and Reservoir Dogs, and then, Pulp Fiction was a different animal from Reservoir Dogs. But,
right.
if you don't have that route where you just happen to hit it right, and it launched for you, you just have to love doing it, and then finding ways to survive in the business like you've done, with the
Yeah.
producing, and really delving into that. So would you say that you enjoy producing, or are you doing it out of necessity?
No, I do. I guess I don't really consider myself a super social person, but
Okay.
all these producers I'm talking to, they're like, "You're really good. It's your personality, and you're very social, and I am a people person, but I'm just not like, most of the time when you think of an actor, you think, oh, they like to be an attention whore, center of attention. That's definitely not me. But but yeah, I like talking to people and I like bringing people together. And so I do find I'm also very competitive. So I think that's what makes it fun, because I like challenges, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's like I have to hunt for an investor. I have to then find projects that I like that hopefully have something for me in it as well as an actor. Obviously, are offering me something decent, nobody wants to work for peanuts.
Yeah.
and so it's like a marriage, it's like dating. So
Mm-hmm.
in this case, it's almost like speed dating. um and so and then when you do find an investor, you have to find the right project. You may have projects and they're like, oh, I'm not really looking for a Western. And like
Mm-hmm.
I recently had a guy who liked a lot of what I had on my slate, but he's like, yeah, unfortunately right now I'm just looking for rom-coms. He's like,
Yeah.
if you find me a good romantic comedy with a major A-list attached,
Mm-hmm.
then let me know.
Okay.
So I have like I'm meeting such amazing different people, so like right now I probably have like at least 8 films on my slate that are like I'm really focused on. Some are more urgent than others because they're going into production
Mm-hmm.
fairly soon, and so they're trying to find equity. So that's the hardest part, I think, is to find equity, right? Because it's easier to get a loan. There's plenty of places that producers can get a loan from,
Mm-hmm.
but a lot of times they either already have a loan and they need additional equity, or they don't want to go the loan or debt route. They would rather just go the equity route so that they're paying less on that money. And so I've learned a lot. It's been interesting. I've always been a quick read. I learned how to do electrical work by watching a guy change a light fixture once, and I was like, oh, that's all you got to do. And so I've changed a few light fixtures over the years just based on so I've always had that kind of entrepreneurial, very motivated go-getter type of personality. So for me, it's just kind of I just like the challenge. It's exciting, and then when you finally get a bite and you bring the investor to sit down at the table to talk with the producers, and then the deal's made, and so that's like all like really fun to be a part of. And then you know that you had a little something to do with why that film got made.
Mm-hmm.
More actors are working, crew people are working, the local economy's benefiting a little bit from it. So that all those things are exciting for me. So and I don't get to act in everything that I work on, and I'm okay with that.
Mm-hmm.
But ultimately that's what I'm hoping that more of these projects will lead to getting more of the acting roles. So I already have a few films, and producers have told me like, we want you to play this role.
Mm-hmm.
And one producer just the other day, he's like, yeah, I'm cool with you playing that part regardless of whether or not you bring money to the table. And I was like,
cool.
Oh, that's cool. It's the third lead in the movie.
That's
so
great.
That's like a big deal. But I'm very invested. I'm not the type of person that just says they're going to do something and then half-ass it.
Mm-hmm.
If I say I'm going to do something, I'm going to look under every nook and cranny until I find, hopefully the right match and be able to make that happen. So to have never done this before, really this side of things, to have done like I think 5 or 6 films now in the
Mm-hmm.
last 15 months. I think that's, I'm not trying to pat myself on the back, but it's like, okay, cool. I think maybe I'm onto something, And then I have these few projects that are lingering right now that are currently, we've got a few investors that are interested. So I'm just, kind of slowly nudging them along. So, but yeah, one of the films I was an EP on has Ruby Rose and Frank Grillo in it. It's called The Yacht. That was a fun experience. Got to shoot that in Mississippi, right on the coast, and have a nice little role in it. I play baby-faced sailor.
Nice.
So my baby face, I guess. I don't know, whatever. Nobody ever really knows my age. So I guess technically I have a baby face. Because if you know how old I was, you know,
Yeah.
look pretty good for 65, right? But anyway, yeah, that was a really fun experience. And I got to hang out with Frank Grillo, went out to dinner, super cool dude, you know, just, you know, happens to be from the Bronx. I was born in the Bronx. So it was just, it was a really, really fun time.
Now, how do you choose which ones you want to like? There has to be some people or some films that come your way. You don't have to say what they are, obviously. But how do you choose when you say like, well, you know what? I don't know. I just don't want. I'm not interested in helping out that project or that person. How do you? You know, like you only have to say what you feel comfortable saying, but it's like, how do you make those determinations?
Well, I mean, I've had projects come my way, and once I saw who was involved, I wasn't. I just said, "Yeah, I'm not." I mean, I was polite about it. I didn't say I wasn't interested. I just said that I had my slate was pretty full, and that I'm really focused on these right now, and I didn't really have room to take on other projects.
Which is going to be true sometimes as well.
Well, it is kind of true. Like I literally have, like, you know, I don't, and I know some people that do what I do, they'll just take on anything and just throw it on the wall and see if maybe something sticks. And I'm a little more focused than that. Like if I'm going to take on a project, it's because I really like the project. I really believe in it. And, or, you know, there's a good opportunity for me in it as an actor. And so I'm going to try to bust my ass to try to help, you know, find the money that's needed so that they can make the movie. But I've had projects that have come my way, and it was like people that were involved in it that I knew about from other people that do what I do, and people don't realize how it's such an incestuous community. You know, everyone knows everyone. It's crazy, and so I get to hear stories from people that got screwed from, let's say, a particular producer that didn't pay them after they brought the money on their last project. And so you get to hear some of these stories and you're like, okay, well, I'm not going to help you because I don't want to get screwed and not get paid for my work. You know, if it was so easy for you to find money, then you would find the money, right? You wouldn't need executive producers to go out there and find you the money. So, so anyway, so that's one of the things I've looked at. There was a project recently, not recently, well, it was in the news not too long ago, that big scandal that happened. And someone had brought me that project. And I looked at it, I was like, I want to do a third Western. I had literally done 2 Westerns back to back. And I'm like, what the hell's going on? Like Westerns are like, literally, there's so many Westerns right now.
They're coming back.
They are, apparently. I guess there's, you know, I mean, if it's done well, they could be really good, right? But so I was like, do I want to do a third? And then I talked to the producer and, you know, the main actor that was involved. I was, you know, I was like, okay, whatever. You know, not my favorite actor. I don't despise him as an actor. I just not one of my favorite actors. He's no Liam Neeson. You know what I mean? And so, or Mel Gibson, who's another one of my favorites. So, but anyway, so I asked them, I said, well, okay, so you need how much? And they're like, well, we need $1 million. I was like, okay. I said, well, you know, if I'm able to find somebody, I said, is there an opportunity for me as an actor? Is there a role I might be right for that you guys can consider me for? I'm more than happy to read for the role. I don't expect to be handed a role. And so he said, which I thought was funny. He said, no, he goes, yeah, the main actor wouldn't approve of that. So he would be very against it because that main actor was also producing. And so I'm like, I'm going to find you $1 million and you can't even give me the opportunity to read for one of the roles. So that kind of put a little sour taste in my mouth. And then all of a sudden, you know, they started filming and there was that big scandal that happened. And I was just like, wow,
that was good following your gut instinct.
Yeah.
You know,
I'm just glad I wasn't a part of that situation.
And I think sometimes when, if you can get that inside scoop on certain people, and you know who's, maybe not going to treat people beneath them, so to speak, as well as they're going to treat themselves, that's it's probably not going to be a very honest project.
Right.
And then corners
Yeah.
are going to get cut, people are going to get frustrated, and things are going to happen, and that's what happened on that one, which is unfortunate.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and
So
there's just a lot of producers that, they just, it's almost like the celebrity thing we talked about earlier. They're on like another planet,
yeah,
and they
yeah,
think that like they're royalty,
yeah.
and that, that you're their slave and you're going to go get them the money, and then they can just screw you over and not pay
Hmm.
you.
Yeah,
And it's like, really? And they don't realize that people talk.
yeah.
So there's a few people that I just won't work with
Hmm.
because they have no integrity,
Yeah.
and they work on they do big movies. And so I'm like, whatever, I'd rather work with good people that I know are going to treat me right. They're going
Hmm.
to give me what they promised in our agreement that we have. And, you have a contract,
Yeah.
and some of these people they don't even like, follow their contract. They'll break their own deal. And so, they figure, what, the little guy's going to go get an attorney and sue me,
Yeah. Yeah.
so anyway, there's a lot of that BS. But I so far haven't physically run into any of that myself, but I know people that are owed a lot of money.
Yeah.
And so I've been able to avoid some of those
Those,
characters.
yeah. That's the thing that and it's like, that's the thing. I used to be disappointed when I acted, when I would find out that actors slept with the casting person or the agent or the manager.
Um,
That I used to think, like, you gotta be kidding me, man.
Plenty of those stories.
Yeah, it's like, is it that important that you compromise your just sense of self, like who you are? But I guess if you don't know who you are, then you're not really compromising anything, which I
Yeah.
think is probably the case with some of those folks. And then, and now being a filmmaker, I'm continually astonished at filmmakers who get their money to make a movie, and then I got the money, I don't care, I don't give a shit, and it's like, this somebody worked for this, or at some point invested wisely or whatever, and they've compounded money that they had into something else.
Mhm.
And regardless, even if they didn't work hard for it and they're a trust fund, it's still their money, and they trust you to handle it.
Right.
And I come across it a lot, and it's I don't know, it goes back to what we were talking about before, about how you're raised,
Yeah.
and it's just that bothers me now, to just kind of see, and there's not, thankfully, the filmmakers in my circle aren't like that, the other directors and folks that I know, um, but you hear stories of other people, you're just talking to somebody, and those things come out, how they just don't care. It's like, well, yeah, but what's your distribution plan, how are you going to get an ROI on any of this money that you're getting? Like, is your
Right.
budget too big? If your budget's too big, could potentially be more difficult for you to make that money back.
Right.
So there's a balancing act between, the name talent you get, what they're going to bring in, how big your budget is, all that. And yeah, so I don't know. There's so many new avenues for people to make money, to make a movie, and my concern is always they're going to just explode it and torpedo it, because they're not going to care. I saw um, this one group. I'm not going to say who they are, but they're doing an equity crowdfunding, um, and they just did one back. I think it wrapped up in April or May. The movie's not even released yet; it's in post, and they're doing another equity crowdfunding. And to
Wow.
me, I was thinking, like, wow, man, isn't that kind of like gilling the lily? I mean, don't you need to see how your other movie's going to do before you just start hopping on raising another three to four to $500,000?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I
There's a few people I know that do stuff like that. There's another, I won't say, but they do movies back to back to back to back to back, and
Yeah,
people just keep funneling money to them. And I'm just like, they keep getting like, one or two kind of pseudo name actors, and I haven't seen any of their films, but I just don't understand how you can keep making those movies. And, that's why I like what you're doing, where people, they're investing, and as the movie makes money, they get their money back. Right. Yeah. It's like your way of thanking them for believing in you. And
yeah, absolutely. And I mean, one of the things with that too, because I felt, it is important to me. And when I spoke to the other folks, the other producers about it, I just said to them, I don't want to get paid until the investors make their initial return back. And then once they're up and they're level, so they're not at a loss anymore, then I'll start getting my director's fee and my, writer fee and all that other stuff. Right. Yeah. But I just feel there's so much lip service. It's always actions speak louder than words. And, sure. And that was the thing, like, we've done the Indiegogo's and all that stuff, and, they're fine. They have their place. But it's not a investment. You're giving money, and you're maybe getting a DVD or a poster or a prop or something.
Credit
or you get credit, and we did that for our last movie, and we gave people their DVDs and their other items that they won, or and their titles and stuff like that. But it wasn't, it's, if you want to move up to the next level, I feel like you have to kind of treat it like an adult game.
Exactly.
And,
I mean, I could see doing your first movie that way. You're just starting out, you want to be able to prove what you can do by having people see your first film. Yeah. And then hopefully from there it snowballs and you're able to get, bigger money and move on to, another plateau, and rather than staying at the same level for each film. Doing it on each film, constantly having a crowdfunding, and I don't know. I guess if that makes people happy, I just don't. I personally, as an artist, I would think you would want to keep evolving and becoming better and bigger, and getting to that next phase, and not staying kind of in that same arena.
Well, I think, and that was a decision that we made after Clandestine. I mean, we filmed that in 2013, and then I had it finished, and we had a distributor by 2016. So that was a 3-year process. And then I think they released it worldwide in 2017. But I remember saying, like, I don't want to rush it. I don't want to do what we did with some of our other films where we really didn't know. So it was like, well, let's get it done, and let's get it premiered, and let's get it out there. And, with that movie, it was like, no, each step of the way, I want to make sure it's color corrected, and it's, the audio is perfect, and everything is as great as it can be for what we made it for. And then I want to make sure that we do the circuit the way it's supposed to be done, and that we can get, sales agents, if need be, and then a distributor, and, all that stuff. And then we all just said, and I particularly felt like, I don't want to do this again if I'm just going to be trying to, push rope, as my dad says. He's like, let's just push some rope. And, it's like, if we're going to do it, I want to do it the right way. And I want to be able to have an impact. And I think, at the end of the day, if somebody's happy and they do an Indiegogo and they raise 2,000 to 3,000 to 4,000, they just make these movies and they're happy as a pig in shit, then, God bless them. That's their thing. But I think
it's kind of like having a lemonade stand when you're like 8 years old.
Right.
And then still having that same lemonade stand when you're 28.
Right. Yeah.
It's okay. Like, I don't know.
You have to know what works for you. Like, that wouldn't work for me. I would be very depressed. I would have to put something in that lemonade to keep me going every day. But for some people that might make them happy. And if it doesn't, then God bless them. I always think the biggest thing is just to pull the trigger and make it happen. And if, you got to make a movie for $100, then just make the movie. You got to start small with friends and family, then just do it. But, if you want to do it for real, you have to start pushing yourself out of that comfort zone, getting yourself out of the garage. There's always that. My cousin used an analogy about, you always have every great idea begins in the garage. And then as you're getting ready to move out of the garage, there's always that person that may not want to leave the garage because they're very comfortable in the garage. Outside
Right.
the garage is scary.
Yeah.
But and it is scary to do it, but you got to do it if you want to
Yeah.
try to get out there, which is what you've done with the producing and moving into that realm and just kind of understanding that, that world, because each world in the industry is different but similar. Acting, writing, producing, directing, they're all different, but they're also they're so similar too at the same time. So
yeah, I always compare it to dating.
mm-hmm.
Like being in this industry is so much like dating,
Yeah.
because you're introducing people to each other, especially as a producer.
Yeah.
Even as an actor, I would always refer to being an actor is just, it's so similar to dating when you have an agent or a manager, and then when things aren't going well and you have to break up with them because you're like, dude, it's been 2 years, you haven't gotten me a damn audition.
Yeah.
Like, what the hell,
Yeah.
like I'm seeing my type on TV every day, so I know they're still using my type. So it's like, I always would feel guilty when I had to end the relationship with my rep, and I would always be like, okay, how do I word it so they don't feel too bad, and well, it's you, I mean, it's me, it's not you, and I want to go in a different direction and explore other things, so it's like breaking up, like it's so similar to being in a relationship, acting, producing, and all that. So that's at least how I look at it.
Yeah, I think like if you want to be successful, you have to be good in relationship. Like you have to be able to do that.
Right.
I was not a particularly good dater. I hated it. Like the walking up to somebody at a bar and just talking to her or whatever.
Right.
It never went well. But it's interesting with this. There's such when you find commonality with people in this industry, because it is so difficult. I think it allows for that communication, because everybody's looking for a life rope or a life raft. They're looking for that. Oh, is this person going to be legit? Are they going to help? And then you have the people out there that are just trying to survive by dunking everybody else under the water so they can get above the water. And it's a very interesting exploration of human behavior, I think.
Yeah, and that's, I think, why I really kind of wanted to go the producer route. I've always been a huge proponent of, if you want something done right, you go do it yourself, right? So that's kind of why I just said, you know what, I'm gonna do it and kind of create my own little. I'm gonna squeeze my way through, rather than having to wait for someone to hopefully get me an audition, and then I get the audition, and I mean, this auditioning is, oh my God, that's like a whole other topic. But yeah, I mean, I had one horror story, and I this casting director was just starting to finally call me in, big, huge casting office, like they do like all the prime time TV stuff. I'm gonna say the network, but and they were starting to call me in. I booked something on one of their shows. The casting director started calling me in for other shows that she was doing. She'd always stop after my take and go, she's like, that was good. She's like, that was really good. She would turn to her associate. She goes, I really believe he's a pizza delivery guy, don't you? I mean, and then I found out from the casting associate for that particular audition, we knew each other, and he's like, she really liked you. Like you would have totally have gotten that part, but the producers decided to bring in the guy who played the pizza delivery guy in the previous season. They brought him back instead. And I was like, oh, I had a lot of those stories where I was like this close. And then, so she called me, and then for another hit show that she was working on, and the audition was at her office. And then the callback was apparently at a different location, same day. So my agent calls me and says, hey, you got a call back for the show you just auditioned for. I was like, awesome. He's like, yeah, so you got to be there at 4:00, so make sure you get there, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, okay, cool. Hang up. I'm driving back. I'm speeding back to the office in Burbank. And I go all the way up the floors, whatever floor it was on. And I walk in, and one of the other casting directors who I had never really met before, because like partners, you know.
Yeah.
And so he saw me, knew my name, never met him my whole life, but he knew who I was.
Mm-hmm.
And he's by last name and everything. And he's like, you're at the wrong location. Okay, where am I supposed? I said, my agent just told me I had a call back. I didn't. And he's like, you need to go into the studio lot.
Oh.
And I'm like, oh my God. It was raining, which rarely happens in LA.
Right.
And I went from being what I thought was like 10 minutes early to being 5 minutes late.
Oh, shit.
And I walk in, the casting associate's like running out like crazy looking for me. And she sees me running and she's like, hurry up, you know, she's getting me in the room. There's all this negative energy that I'm now absorbing. And I like literally am thrown in front of the creator of the TV show. Huge guy. Like, I mean, this guy has created like 10 hits that are on TV, like major. And so the casting director's there. She's like behind the camera and she's giving me the evil eye, you know, Sicilian evil eye. She's like behind the lens going, and I'm just like, okay. And I'm like, what the fuck was my line? I literally just went blank, and I'm like looking for a script. There's no script around, and I'm like,
oh my God,
get it together. What was? And so I didn't know. Obviously, they didn't know that I was like in my brain for a second trying to figure out, because I'm like sitting here taking in all this crap, and so finally I'm like, okay. They're like, okay, you ready? I was like, yeah. And the creator of the show was like so sweet and nice. He didn't know that I was getting the stink eye from behind him.
From the casting,
he didn't know that I was just like thrown in the room by her assistant. And he was just super cool. He's like, thank you so much for coming out. It's great to have you. I was like, oh, thank you so much for seeing me again. I really appreciate it. And went in, did my line, said thank you so much, and I left. And I never heard from her again.
Oh, shit.
So it's like, you know, you get judged on sometimes a circumstance without them knowing, like, well, maybe the actor wasn't told.
There's a pettiness, and I think it's it's overcompensation due to insecurity with a lot. It's why I started doing my own stuff and why I joined with a couple of other people, because I couldn't take the petty bullshit insecurities from casting directors anymore, agents or managers. I have a story of this one lady who was what the hell was she? She was a casting director / manager or some crap. And this is going back a while ago, and she's still kind of around over here on the East Coast. And
that's not a conflict of interest by any means.
Not at all. No, not at all. Not at all. It's totally justifiable.
Yeah.
She hated me from day one. Hated me. Hated my guts. My friends bumped into her at a bar, and before I had even met her. And she was hitting on some lady or whatever. I had some crush on her. And my friends, being my friends in their 20s, you know, we're like laughing, joking around. They connected with, because initially they thought these ladies were straight, and they weren't. So they're, you know, but then when they found that they weren't, they were all talking, having a good time. This casting director was so like whatever, distraught. I always wondered if this like colored her feeling about me. But my friends, I hadn't been with them that night, and they were like, "Oh, our friend, you know, Dave's an actor. He's really good. You know, you totally should. You know, you should totally touch base with him. And you know, can we get your number and all this other stuff?" So, so I got her number, and then like I bumped into her. I forgot how it all went, but like I went up to her at some like mutual party thing that was going on, and she was so like, you know, that snooty thing, like I'm in power, you know, or whatever. And I remember thinking like, wow, well, this person's an asshole, you know, but maybe I'm just not judging them correctly right now. You know, maybe there's something going on. For whatever the reason, if there was something I got sent to that got accepted, you know, an audition or whatever, she would always just give me so much shit, you know. And then finally I had done this stupid, like, you know, how to audition, because I always felt like auditioning was the worst thing I did out of
Yeah,
everything.
I hate it.
And I took this audition class, and I said, my business mind started working. I said, let me go take an audition class from someone who I know hates my guts, because I'm curious what she's going to say. I
Yeah,
might get more truth from her than
yeah,
people that like me. So I went and I took this class. And there was this really good guy. What was his name? He was a younger agent. I think it was James Camilleri or Cavallari. I don't remember. There was two guys, a James Camilleri and a James Cavallari. One was a casting director and one was a agent. So whoever the agent guy was the one who was there. So I went and I do this scene after we prepped for it, and then he comes in like the final class and everything. And I remember he starts saying, Dave, I've known you for a while. That was great. I actually want to represent you. And then she starts going, well, wait a minute, what? And he was like, I want to rep him. He's great. And she's like, well, but what do you mean? Like, well, but didn't you catch that he did this and that? I mean, he did, like when he did this, like, I didn't believe that. He goes, I believed it. And he goes, how would you not believe that? I totally believed it. He goes, Dave, did you believe it? I said, yeah, I believed it. So there was this weird thing, this like psychosis in her head that was so odd. Wow. And you see that though with some of these folks, not all of them. I've met some agents and managers and casting folks who are very nice. Yeah. I had one, there was a show called Life on Mars, I think. It was like this remake of some show in the 70s. And the producers were yapping it up while I was auditioning for my callback. And the casting director got pissed and yelled at the producers and said, there's an actor acting, all dramatic, whatever. But I appreciated it because at least it respected my time, Yeah. And we're human beings. And that's something that I think a lot of people in the industry forget. They forget we're human. It's more about me feeling powerful and, having my ego stroked and all that other stuff.
Right.
I'm not about that shit anymore. I just don't. And I know that I ever was. I just don't give a shit about it.
Yeah.
So
for sure. Yeah. I just want to work. I'm like, I don't care about fame. I'm too old to even think about that anymore. Like, when I was younger, maybe I was like, oh yeah, that'd be cool one day to be like Tom Cruise. And, but now, I'm getting older and I'm just like, I just want to work, I want to be like, I'd be happy to have a career like Steve Buscemi or, you know what I mean? Like I prefer being a character actor, which has always been my struggle because people always cast me, they always wanted to push me towards leading man type stuff. And it's not that I can't handle that. It's that I find it less interesting. Yeah. I find some of the more character driven roles to be a lot more exciting as an actor. Yeah. And so that's what I've always gravitated towards. I mean, there was a certain point where I was going up against oh my God, I just went blank on his name. The main actor from Ozark.
Bateman?
Yeah. I was like, the casting director called me in for a movie. Again, this is going back like 15 years or longer actually. And so there was a movie that they were casting. And so I went in to play like this, young, cute guy, whatever, leading role. And then all of a sudden, like a few months later, I see the movie coming out. It's Bateman's playing that role. And I'm like, that just, it's just not that I can't do those kind of roles like that he does. I actually like him a lot. And I do find what he does to be very interesting. I think personally, I love Ozark. I think it's one of the best shows on Netflix. But anyway, so yeah, I've always been drawn to like the Christopher Walken and the, Steve Buscemi and stuff like that. Jim Carrey, even though he was leading man, that's where I was like, well, he's leading man, but he's still character. And I was like, well, that's definitely in my wheelhouse. Like that's something that, I kind of aspire to. And that he had a huge influence on me as a teenager in Living Color.
Yeah. Right.
With, I finally saw someone on TV that I could relate to, where I was like, wow, so you can be okay looking and funny. Cause you always had to be kind of funny looking to be funny. Yeah. Kind of, that's how you. Yeah.
Like the Bill Murray thing, like Bill Murray's Chevy Chase. They're kind of like,
Steve Martin,
Yeah.
and so finally I was like, wow, I kind of saw a little bit of myself in Jim Carrey, and he also did a lot of the type of humor, I've always been a big fan of the fart jokes, so, as a little kid, like, or even as an adult, I still would do it. Like someone bends over and I'm like, so that's something that I grew up watching stuff like that, the Three Stooges, Charlie Chaplin, Abbott Costello, Laurel and Hardy. Every Christmas, the Laurel and Hardy Christmas special, I forget what the official title was. Like it was like a Nutcracker version that they did.
Oh, yeah, I know what you're talking about. I totally can't remember it right now.
Yeah, it was always on, like, I don't know, like PBS or one of those types and it was always on around Christmas, and I loved it. Like, I just was like that. So when I became an actor, that's the kind of stuff I wanted to do. And I feel like I was really misunderstood, and a lot of people didn't get me. They liked my look, but they didn't really understand the direction that I wanted to go. So a lot of agents and managers were like pushing me in this direction to like be like a Tom Cruise. And I'm like, I'm not Tom Cruise. That's not me, And so, so it's been interesting. It's been, that's also why I want to do my own projects down the road, so, little by little, it's like baby steps. I'm kind of trying to build something, and I know it's not going to happen overnight, but there's momentum. Right. And so, I'm hoping that this year's better than last year. Yeah. And that, every year is better than the last. That's kind of like what I'm going for. Yeah. So, I don't want to be, what's his name? Oh my God. Lord of the Rings, Ian McKellen. I don't want to be discovered when I'm like 70, So I'd like to, be able to make a living as an actor while I can still get up and walk and not have to have a diaper on, Right. So that's the goal. Yeah.
Well, it looks like, from what I know of you and just getting to know you over the years, you're definitely doing that. You're making your things happen. Your opportunities, you're not waiting for people to give you opportunities, although when they come along, you're happy to take them. Right. But you're also, carving out your own, opportunities and roles and all those things. So, so I was excited to have you on the podcast. I was coming up with people I wanted to talk to, and I was like, well, I definitely want to talk to James. So I was happy to have you on. I know we had some scheduling challenges, but we finally got it to happen. And, it was awesome. So it was great to have a, brother from New Jersey doing this stuff. So
for sure. I know I was excited when you told me you're from Jersey. I was like, oh my God, I found my Matt Damon 20 years later.
Yeah, I know. It's funny. I was always looking for, I remember hearing that story about Ben Affleck and Matt Damon, saying like, God, that's really cool. They get on the train together, come down from Boston, do an audition in New York, make a day of it, throw their headshots around, then go get something to eat, get back on the train. And I was like, that was really neat that those guys, and that was cool that those guys had that, and they've been able to keep, their careers going through ups and downs and challenges and everything else. But
funny quick story. So a film I worked on, the house that we used to shoot one of the scenes, the owner, it was like a really unique looking house. It almost looked like a little castle, really nice, affluent neighborhood in LA. And he was telling us, I said, oh, what's the history on the house? Like, because it looked like it had some sort of interesting story. And he goes, actually, Ben Affleck and Matt Damon stayed here when they wrote Good Will Hunting.
Oh, really?
Like, that's where they wrote the script. And he goes, yeah, they stayed here for a couple of years. And with I believe Casey Affleck, he said, his brother. And I was like, wow, that's pretty cool. Yeah. Yeah. So you could just feel it. Like that felt like it had some sort of a story. But that was, so it's just interesting. I just thought I'd share a little story.
Share a little story. Well, man, we will be talking. Looking forward to working with you. And,
for sure, I'm excited. I can't wait.
Yeah, and it was a blast having you on.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Yeah, we'll talk soon.
You got it, man.
All right, take care.